It is the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by Ian Rivers. A great week to be a Beaver, a bounce back week for Bemidji State University. Not that last week was necessarily bad, but, this is just a week where everything's coming up. Bemidji State Beavers. Ian, we got a lot to talk about in this podcast today. We got football to talk about and their big win. Women's soccer gets a couple dubs on the weekend to get back to 500. Volleyball starting off the season 5-3. The Dragon Twilight we're recapping for cross country. Men's women's golf is out there doing things. And, oh, by the way, we're going to talk a little BSU men's hockey, CCHA preseason rankings, previews, awards, all that good stuff is put out there. So much to cover in today's episode. We're starting to get into that point. We always talk about it, Ian, where like fall sports get in there like peak, and then winter sports are like just starting up. So there's so much going on in the athletic scene right now at Bemidji State University. But let's start off, Ian, and talk about the football team. They top Southwest Minnesota State pretty darn easily. They get a shutout, and you got to go to Bemidji for the game this weekend. Not Marshall, but Bemidji, as we discussed on last week's podcast. Ian, vibes in Bemidji. Beautiful day for football is what it looked like.
Yeah, it was a gorgeous day. Vibes were eerie. I will say, like, it was a weird vibe at the stadium. Like, the team was playing pretty well. I think it was a sloppy but dominant victory. Like, there was a couple penalties that kind of hurt them in the first half. They cleaned that up in the second half. There was a fumble in the first half. So you were only up 14-0 at the end of the first half. I don't think it was a marquee matchup. Southwest has been down on their luck a couple times or over the last couple years. So I just think that the crowd itself was a little bit mild, to say the least, because the Beavers, had it in hand pretty much the whole time. There was never really any tension in the stadium that would cause anybody to get really rowdy. And to be fair, we showed up a little bit late, so we ended up sitting kind of behind the students because everything was pretty full up. So maybe on the other side, it was a little bit more raucous during, third downs and that sort of thing. But especially in the second half when the student section kind of clears out as it does for football games that are not very big stature up there. It was just a little quiet. There was exciting plays, big touchdowns. Bryce Peters had another huge day. And I think it might have been just a little bit too warm. That is an issue with the Chet on like a 2:00 kickoff. The sun was in your eyes the entire game. If you didn't bring sunglasses or a hat, I apologize to you because that was probably a miserable experience. I think if it would have been like 8 degrees cooler, it would have been just like the perfect day. But you're kind of sweating because the sun's just
needed a little more of a lake breeze off Lake Bemidji,
The breeze was okay, but it was not very consistent. And so whenever it did come for 5-10 seconds, it was awesome. But I think the temperature might have just been a little bit too warm, and it kept people a little quieter than they otherwise would have been as well. But other than that, it was a fun game to watch.
The turf, by the way, I think with sorry to cut you off, but like the turf, when you look at stadiums like that, also does add to the heat, I think.
Yes.
I've went to like Wade Stadium in Duluth. It's their baseball stadium where like the Huskies, their Northwoods League team plays, and I think a couple others play there as well. I've had to do stuff at that field where it's like a July day and the heat's just coming down, and all of a sudden you walk onto the field and you can feel heat coming up from the turf. So again, like just a weird, too hot, which you don't think is a complaint for football games in Bemidji,
right?
But that sometimes plays a factor. And playing Southwest Minnesota State, who's not great. The team, even though it was 14-0 at half, I think we agree like it was that 14-0 lead might as well have been 28-0. Just with the way both those teams were playing in that first half. I know we're getting into this game, Ian, but just firsthand, what was it like watching Bemidji State football in person in 2024? What were your vibes? What were your vibes of the team? What stood out to you getting to see them in person?
Well, they're massive, dude. I kind of forget how big some of these players are. The one that really stood out to me was Stephen Hoffman, defensive end. He is an absolute animal out there. From the second he went out, I think he was one of the captains. He went out there, and it's just like, dude, this guy's going to wreck shop. And it was really the case for our entire defensive line. That was a huge thing in the first half. Outside of like one drive in the second half where SMSU had a couple of decent runs stringed together, the defensive line just dominated all day. The quarterbacks had no time to throw. The running backs, Southwest ran the ball okay. They only averaged 3.3 yards per carry on the day, but the defensive line absolutely feasted on the SMSU line, and that was something that stood out to me. It's just like, man, we got some big guys, like tall, muscular guys on that defensive line, and it is a testament to how good the run defense has been so far this year. But yeah, a really good defensive day all around because the passing defense played particularly well. I think they had
fly zone.
Yeah, they had one interception and allowed only 40 yards through the air. Bemidji State outgained SMSU 451 to 137. That is a good? Pretty dominant game. And that, again, that leads into why the crowd is a little bit quiet. Even though the score was pretty close, it was like, yeah, there's no chance that they like come back and beat us, man. Like they just were not moving the ball at all. It was kind of just like Bemidji would get itself in these 3rd and 14 situations every once and then. And well, we got a punt now. Shoot. Even though we picked up 25 yards on this drive, now we went backwards just one time and it ends up making you punt. So it was a little bit just like it was a dominant game. And I mean, hey, 33-0. That's still a huge margin of victory. It's not the 70-0 that, Tennessee hangs on Tennessee Tech or something like that. But that's a really good margin of victory, especially for a team like Bemidji, who has morphed into, honestly, more of a rushing team. 47 rush attempts in this game for Bemidji, as opposed to 28 dropbacks for Sam McGath. And Zach Romack, I believe, is the backup quarterback that got some action in this game, just like we wanted. Yep, he looked pretty good. Let's go take a look at his individual stats. He didn't throw the ball too much, just 2 attempts for 2 yards. Most of them were just quick little outs to the flat. But he did run the ball once for 10 yards, which was very good to see. Good for him getting in there. He played for a couple drives, mostly just handing the ball off to Antonio Brown, the redshirt freshman for the Beavers, with the greatest name ever, of course. We hope that his head is okay, but
I'm sure it is. All respect to Antonio Brown from Algonquin, Illinois. He's a redshirt freshman, obviously getting his first taste of BSU football. I did have one of my old roommates in college saw that Bemidji State football tweeted touchdown Antonio Brown. He sent it to me and he's like, what's going on? Who do we have as our running back? What's happening? So, I mean, cool. Congratulations to him.
Dude, he ran really well, man.
He ran
7 carries, 52 yards. He was – and I don't know if Southwest had their backups in or not, but even if they did, I mean, he's a big guy, and I'm excited to see what the future holds with him.
6 foot even, 204 pounds.
Yeah, he's a big boy at running back. I would not like to be meeting him in the A gap. You know what I mean? So all around a great rushing attack for BSU. Jaden Washington, 11 carries, 51 yards. Justin in Cabrera, 11 carries, 41 yards. Jared Gronsky, 10 carries, 32 yards. Just a very balanced attack from those that 3-headed running back tandem that BSU has. Sam McGath, another pretty good game. 18 of 26, 271 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick, but it was like a Hail Mary.
An end of half. It's like an end of half. Like you count it on your stats, but it's like a time's going to run out. Just throw it deep. If it gets picked off, who cares?
Exactly. It was kind of a thing.
So it's not like
he threw it into triple coverage, just hoping that Bryce Peters could make something magical happen.
I mean, honestly, with the way it's been going, that's not a bad bet.
Yeah. Speaking of Bryce Peters, I mean, he had another phenomenal game. 5 catches, 128 yards, and 2 more touchdowns. He now leads all of Division II with 7 touchdowns. I believe the next highest is 5. But don't quote
all
me.
All 7 of Sam McGath's touchdowns, by the way, have been to Peters. Like that connection has just been so good. It's been awesome to see.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable so far this season. And I can pull up Bryce's stats overall, see how many receiving yards on the season he's got in a little bit here. But yeah, a really good performance from BSU. It was nothing pretty, but they got the job done. They're 2-1, and it's on to Sioux Falls. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's exactly what you want. They moved up 2 spots in the coaches poll this week. They're now up to 21. So back on the move. Back we move. We're moving back up. So hey, I mean, it's just there's not much to say about it because they just took care of business. They did what they needed to do. Nobody on the defense had more than 5 tackles, which tells you exactly how often the defense was out there. I mean, they just weren't because it was like 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Oh my God, they got a first down. Picked them off, fumble. Like the defense just wasn't out there. So it was a really good performance from them.
I mean, look at the time of possession. Bemidji State had the ball for 34 and a half minutes of game time. SMSU got 19 minutes. Like just straight up keep away. And yeah, the score doesn't look. I mean, back to the old days where Bemidji State beat Crookston like 72-0 back in the day. I remember that game. I was there. It was just ugly. Like some of those games, you're not going to get that game every time. And also, I don't think the score, the point differential between these two teams, that says one thing, in the halftime score and whatever. But this overall was just a straight up butt whooping. Like that's one of those things where don't read too much into things. Like Bemidji State took care of business. They did their job. They did what they needed to do. They got in, they got out, they ran the ball well. McGath passed efficiently. And it's one where you come in, certain colleges will do this a lot too, where some colleges come in and they just run it down. They run up the score down your throat. They do whatever. And it's like a 58-0 win. And some coaches are like, we know we're better than them. They know we're better than them. We're just going to come in, play our game, get in, get out, move on to the next week. And it doesn't matter what the score is going to look like because we are going to come away with the victory. And I think that's the same thing for Bemidji State. They knew they just had to stick with running the ball, not get too greedy, just play consistently good football, and they were going to win. And it didn't matter that the score was 14-0 at halftime, as we talked about. The defense shut them down, and there was just nowhere for them to go. So it's just overall a really, really good victory. And I mean, just as an aside, yikes, man, for Southwest Minnesota State. Yikes, man. I have there's a defensive lineman for them, Gideon Irvesty, Verndale High School grad, for those of you who know where that is. He grew up down the road from my parents' house, which is, I got to call a couple of his games when he was in high school. He's a nice little player on the defensive side for the Mustangs, but outside of that, man, that team might be in the running for worst team in the conference. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. 0-2 start for them so far. Maybe a good time to go around the NSIC and see if that's true, because, man, I was not impressed with anything they had going on Saturday. Yeah, so if you want to go around the NSIC, we're going to take a look first in Sioux Falls. Sioux Falls taking down UMary 35-33. Pretty close game from a team in Sioux Falls that I was pretty impressed with so far early in the season. They had some pretty big wins, so either Mary is a little bit better than usual or Sioux Falls had a little bit of a stinker of a game. I'm just being the noticer here. I'm just noticing. I'm not making any observations. I'm just noticing something. Okay. Right. Yeah. The big news of the weekend, MSU Moorhead coming back and stunning, myself included, and Minnesota Duluth. In Duluth, the first time MSU Moorhead has ever beat Duluth in the Division II era. Ever? In the Division II era. The last time they beat them, they were both NAIA. I think it was – I can't remember how long ago that was, but – I mean, it had to have been – first time in Division II. I mean, Mike, well, and by the way, it happened. They got a touchdown as time expired, and instead of kicking to go to overtime, they went for 2 for the win and just a little slant pass into the end zone. I mean, the guts of that team to just go in there. You're on the road. Don't take it to overtime. Just go for the win right now. And they did it. And look, Bemidji State doesn't play Duluth this year, if I'm correct. Correct. And they play MSUM, so that's going to be interesting. But look, Duluth is a team that was ranked. Duluth is a team that came into the year with some expectations. And if you're looking, even though Bemidji State preseason favorite, right? Preseason favorite in the conference. Even though Bemidji State did lose to Mankato, Like, if you're looking at how does Bemidji State get back to the NCAA tournament, UMD losing that game does hurt their chances a lot.
Does it?
I don't know if it hurts their chances like a ton, but it's more of like,
I think if anything, it might help.
Nationally, MSUM is not, like, I know we're higher on them. We've seen them more. But nationally, like, at the end of the season, if MSUM just has their normal season, like, could be something that's held against them.
Yeah, but we don't play Duluth. And we do play the team that now beat Duluth. So
right.
that helps us, if anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We don't get the chance to knock Duluth off. That helps us in terms of conference because we can't take games off Duluth if we need to. And I think that it helps us because now Moorhead's resume just looks a little bit better because in the past, yes, you're right. Moorhead drops this game. They're going to finish the season 6-5 or 5-6, and a win over them doesn't look so good.
When I say it hurts them, by the way, I mean UMD. It hurts UMD if they want to get into that.
Okay.
Yeah, it
yes.
hurts them.
You did say BSU. I'm like, I don't know if that hurts BSU that much.
It hurts UMD.
It does hurt UMD.
It helps BSU's chances because it hurts UMD's.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're on the same page.
Yes,
yeah, it was a huge game for Moorhead. They just got their butts whooped last week by Wayne State. So for them, I think they were down by 15 with like 3 minutes and some seconds left in this game. Scored. I'm not sure how they got the ball back, if it was an onside attempt or what, but to win that game the way they did, good for them. And it'll be a fun game when we meet them later this season. Minot State stays unbeaten, a 17-14 win over Northern State. And you know what I just found out this week? Because people were praising Moorhead on Twitter, and then somebody else responded, don't forget about Minot State. They beat Northern State for the first time since 1992. Also, they run the triple option. So that will be very interesting when we get to Minot State in a few weeks. I did not know that. That makes so much sense because they only passed the ball 6 times last week against SMSU.
I was going to say, who do they think they are? Georgia Tech?
I was looking at that game just because, like, SMSU outgained Minot State, like, just like we did to SMSU this week. So I'm like, wait, how did Minot win 42-9? And it's because they had 4 defensive touchdowns on the day against SMSU.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
Yeah. So Minot State 3-0 on the season.
Interesting.
Still not a button win, but they'll take it. 3-0 for Minot State. That's crazy. Bemidji State 33-0 over SMSU. South Dakota State Augustana. That's a big time matchup. South Dakota State takes care of business 24-3. A little impressed by Augustana's defense. I was
going to say
only allowing 24 points to the reigning FCS national champion. I believe back to back,
and they're pretty favored to do it again. Now, as we talked about, is this like a situation where SDSU knows they're better and it's like, let's just run. We're not trying to win by 40. Like, so I haven't watched any of the game, so I don't know, but yeah, that's still impressive for Augustana to come in there and do that.
At least defensively. So, yeah, Augustana later this season, they're going to be good again. We know that much. Minnesota State, Wayne State, probably one of the better matchups of the week in terms of potential NSIC championship berths on the line. Minnesota State did come away with a win, 35-28. Wayne came back and tied it late, but Minnesota State took the lead, I believe, with like under a minute to go. So Minnesota State keeps their late game heroics in check and picks up a 35-28 win over Wayne. And then Winona State 31 over Concordia St. Paul 14. So you take a look at the standings. They're starting to take shape a little bit. Bemidji's currently sitting in a tie for 6th place, but still got a lot of season to go. Minot State and Sioux Falls are tied for first. Both teams were pretty bad last year. So this will be a very interesting conference. I think it's Minnesota State, probably Augustana. Augustana is only 1-0. That's why they're not up there. But I expect there to be a pretty tight race come the end of the season. Or maybe it'll just be 2 teams and everybody will be, 2 and 3 losses behind them fighting for 3rd place. But it'll be an interesting conference to say the least.
It'll be so fascinating because, Bemidji State only has 1 loss. There's a couple. I know UMD just lost, but that's only one loss on the year. And if they play really well throughout, there's still a chance they could be up there. There's a conference that at the top beats up on each other. So we'll see what happens as the season ends. But talking about conference teams beating up on each other, here we go. USF and Bemidji State getting ready. This game is on the road. Always a tough place to play down in Sioux Falls. I think really, once again, it's just going to come down to a couple things. Winning the turnover battle, winning, the penalty game. For Bemidji State, it's weird because they had some penalties in their first match against Michigan Tech. And then against Mankato, they played really, really well in terms of just discipline and penalties. And then last week, they had 9 penalties for 95 yards. So I think that's just one area that's concerning, maybe isn't the right word, but just weird, something to keep an eye on, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to keep that in check, but week to week, because it wasn't bad against Mankato, and then they struggle with a little bit more against SMSU again. So we'll see against Sioux Falls what they can do. Just looking at some of the defensive statistics, scoring defense, Bemidji State has the advantage. 14.7 points per game. Sioux Falls allows 18.7, but Sioux Falls also averages 34 points per game. Bemidji State only 27. So 2 pretty evenly matched teams. We said it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks to really start seeing what teams are going to be really good at scoring. Every game, obviously, that you go, the statistics are going to get more and more accurate to tell the tale of what team you're playing. And now we're 3 games into the season. We're going to have a little bit better idea of what to imagine for Sioux Falls. Bemidji State, 3rd in the conference in terms of rushing offense. They average 218 yards per game. These 2 teams can stuff the run and they can run the ball because Sioux Falls right behind them and in 4th with 187 yards per game. And then they're the 2 of the top 3 teams in terms of rush defense. Bemidji State, 78.3 rush yards per game allowed, and Sioux Falls with just 90. So it's like iron meets iron in terms of the run game for both of these teams.
It feels like they're so evenly matched, doesn't it? Like everywhere, they're just right next to each other.
Yeah, and let's take a look quick at the passing statistics. Bemidji State with a little bit of an advantage, but it's, again, only about 15 to 20 yards of an advantage. Bemidji State averages 205 yards a game through the air. Sioux Falls 187. Look at the passing defense. Bemidji State in 7th, 193 pass yards a game allowed. Sioux Falls in 8th, 195 pass yards per game allowed. These teams are dead even in terms of pretty much everything other than like scoring offense and scoring defense. Bemidji State leads in scoring defense, but Sioux Falls leads in scoring offense. So this is going to be a complete up in the air game. I have no idea what to make of this one. Sioux Falls at home, though, maybe that gives them the advantage.
Yeah, the advantage, they're going to be able to try and run the football. Again, Camden Dean, their running back, is Camden Dean leads Sioux Falls in rushing, but he's also 4th in the conference in rushing yards with 221 amassed so far in the season, a couple touchdowns. Right behind him, of course, is Jaden Washington of Bemidji State with 204 rushing yards. But again, this is going to be 2 teams that want to do a little bit of running, which hasn't always been the case for Bemidji State, which is again just kind of how this team has looked this year. Again, passing, Bemidji State has a little bit of an edge, but if you're Sioux Falls and you've been winning some of your games, you don't necessarily need to pass as much. So these 2 teams are just deadlocked in everything. Excuse me, Camden Dean's their quarterback, so a little bit of a dual threat for Bemidji State, having to deal with Sioux Falls in Camden Dean, who is their, again, going to be a guy that's going to be running around. They're going to need to keep him in check, and it's just some of those areas where it's going to be big for the defense, keeping him in the pocket, keeping him from doing his runs, and that's really could be one of the deciding things in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like you said, how do you know? Because Bemidji wasn't really trying to force the ball down the field against SMSU, but every once and then it was working for them. And There was a crazy catch by Bryce Peters along the sidelines. He made a man miss, and then he toe tapped down the sidelines. I want to ask Bryce if he thinks he stayed in on that play, because he was very, very close to stepping out, but they called
Well,
him.
you can review in Division II, so they didn't
Right.
challenge.
But I don't know if there's a camera angle on that sideline that would help them in a Division II game review that play. So the call on the field was touchdown, and it was very close. I wasn't watching with binoculars at the sidelines, but so Bemidji wasn't trying to force the ball downfield either. Sioux Falls was in a pretty close game against Mary, and they I guess we can look at the average for passing yards. Sioux Falls, guess what? Bemidji State and Sioux Falls within a passing yard per drop back. Sioux Falls averages 7.8, Bemidji State 7.1. So it's very, very close. These teams are neck and neck on like every single statistic.
Do you want another one? Individually, Bryce Peters, of course, leads the NSIC in receiving yards with 308 and 7 touchdowns. You want to know who's right behind? Carter Slikus. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his last name, from Sioux Falls. He has 18 receptions, which is one more than Bryce, but has 270 yards and a couple touchdowns as well. He is the second leading receiver in the NSIC behind Bryce. So just these two teams are very identical with each other, it feels like.
Yeah, I guess it was it might be pretty good to predict a pretty close game in this one, but I just dude, I've been looking over these stats for like passing and rushing. MSU Moorhead, top passing offense in the conference. As per usual, they are a air raid offense. 360 yards per game through the air. They also have the worst pass defense with 300 yards allowed per game. And then you tap over to rushing offense. MSU Moorhead has only run the ball 36 times this year for 8 yards a game. What the hell?
Wait, say that again.
Oh my God. 36 carries for 8 yards per game. So they average per attempt. Or wait. Yeah, how many yards total do they have? Okay, 36 carries, 16 yards. They average 8 yards a game. And I'm sure most of that, probably from sacks. I'm sure they run the ball.
Have to
I'm not sure how we get to sack yardage. I have no idea.
I don't know if that's tabulated. Yeah, I don't know.
But, they average 0.4 yards per rush. That's crazy.
Oh, not ideal.
Hey, when you can throw the ball like they do, I guess they don't need to run. But that was Bemidji State's problem for a while. It's like we could throw the ball over the yard.
Yeah.
Not to that effect. But, to a certain extent, you got to be able to run the ball at some point. But, hey, more power to them. If you want to give a quick score prediction, CJ, we've been talking about football for like 28 minutes now. So
I know. I looked at it. I was like, all right, we better decide who wins this one. I don't know. We're homers. This is a Bemidji State podcast. Beavers win 24-21. Let's do it.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, against Mankato, what would the fun be if I picked Bemidji State literally every week? But I think this is a game they absolutely can win. And now I have a lot more confidence that they actually will go out and do it. I think Bemidji State wins this one. I think it's going to be 28-26. It's going to be a weird score for Sioux Falls. I don't know how they get to 26, but I think they're getting there.
Defense travels, and Bemidji State has been a defensive team so far throughout the first 3 weeks. Gotta be a good sign here for the Beaver football program. All right, Ian, let's move on. Women's soccer, they have a get right week. They get back into the win column, and not just by doing that, Ian, they have a little offensive explosion throughout these games. If you look at Bemidji State women's soccer in their 2 games over the week, they played, of course, in Iowa, and they got some games against Quincy and Upper Iowa. They will beat Quincy 2-1. They beat Upper Iowa 5-1. 7 goals in 2 games. And Upper Iowa, nice little get-right game for Bemidji State as they head into conference play, especially after they came into the weekend with no goals scored on the season.
Yeah, it was a big weekend for them to kind of like you said, get right, get your confidence back. You know, they're not used to getting swept over the course of a weekend, especially at the Chet. So I think it's good for them to get their feet back underneath them before conference play starts, and hopefully they can. They have a pretty easy matchup, let's just say, to start off the conference slate against Minnesota Crookston, who is currently 0-2-1. I believe they have scored 0 goals on the season, and they have given up 2 goals on the season. So that would probably mean a 0-0 draw and 2 1-0 losses for Crookston. Yeah, the goal differential, the margin, the Beavers currently sit in a tie for third with a plus 0.75 goal margin on the season. Of course, lose your first 2 games, that's going to drop a little bit, but then a huge outburst against Upper Iowa, like you said. We'll give some credit quick to some goal scorers. Katrina Barthelt, Sydney Sutherland, Madeline Davey. Katrina Barthelt, again, getting her 3rd of the season, and Grace Swatch, I believe, is the pronunciation of that. And the Friday game, CJ, was a little bit closer. They were down in the 76th minute. They had to get some heroics from Katrina Barthelt, and then Maria Stocky just 2 minutes later putting away a penalty kick to go up 2-1. So left it pretty late in that game against Quincy, but yeah, good to see them get back in the win column. And now hopefully we can do what we've been doing and dominate the NSIC.
Yeah, I mean, let's get back to it. We got a tournament title to defend for the Beavers. And by the way, I think we didn't talk about this a ton pre-recording, but I think Barthelt she earns NSIC Offensive Player of the Week if she scored 3 goals. I mean, I think
not quite a hat trick, but over 2 games, we'll still give it to you.
Yeah. No hats, but you know what? You get the Beaver Banter Player of the Week. I think that's fair, Ian. We didn't really talk about it pre-recording.
No, we didn't. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I thought about that when we were talking about football. I'm like, we never talked about that. But yes, Katrina Barthelt,
when you do that, it's pretty easy.
Very, very worthy of that award this week. So congrats to her.
Congrats to the junior for the women's soccer team, Katrina Barthelt, again from Bartlett, Illinois, joining now the ranks of our player of the game, our player of the week nods on Beaver Banter, the captain or one of the captains for the soccer team this season. All right, swinging around to volleyball, another good week for them. They go to Michigan for a tournament. They play, tournament, is that the right word? Do you think tournament's the right word for that? Or is it,
it's kind of just like
a bracket, like a challenge.
It's like a showdown because that, like college hoops does it every year, the State Farm Champions Classic, where it's not really a tournament, but it's the same 4 teams every year that just kind of rotate who they play. So it was kind of like that. I think everybody kind of played everybody.
There's no bracket kind of deal. It's like a round robin, maybe is what. I mean, nobody says round. Does anybody use the term round robin anymore?
I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't heard it in a long time. So
long time. So Bemidji State, they go to Michigan. They come away with 3 victories overall. They moved to 5-3, Ian, on the season. They lost in 3 sets to Grand Valley State. That'll happen. Grand Valley State's ranked 19th in the country, but you get a 3-set victory over Glenville State. You beat Davenport in 5 sets, the host. Then you beat Saginaw Valley State in 4. I mean, you got to feel good on your confidence. There's a bit of a schedule change for Bemidji State. On Friday, they were going to play Minnesota State in Mankato as a non-conference game. We talked about that a week ago. That game has been canceled. Instead, Bemidji State, they moved their game from earlier in the week. They move it to Friday. They're going to go to Crookston to start the NSIC schedule, and then they're home for the home conference opener on Wednesday, a week from Wednesday, on the 25th of September, when they play Minnesota Duluth. So Crookston, again, from what I can remember, not necessarily the toughest NSIC conference opponent in volleyball. Minnesota Duluth, a little better. I mean, the NSIC, of course, being one of the top volleyball conferences in the country. So to get 5 wins coming into conference play, I think is a big deal for this volleyball team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that game against Grand Valley State would have been nice to take a set off of them, because that's going to be a good barometer test for, there's, like you said, there's a lot of teams up at that quality, if not higher than that quality, that the Beavers will end up playing this season. I think there's 3 teams that are 8-0, a team that's 7-0. Minnesota Duluth is one of those. Minnesota State is another one of those. So you're going to have some tests coming up here early in the season already. Crookston so far 3-5. I'm pretty sure they're usually not one of the better teams in the conference for volleyball. So, but hey, last year Bemidji State kind of broke free from that bottom echelon of the conference. Let's hope that they can stay there this season. I want to say that last year we were only 4-4 through our non-conference slate. I can't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure we were 4-4. So you took one step forward in the non-conference slate. Let's see if they can do it again in the conference slate and take another step forward there.
They were actually 3-5
Really?
heading into their conference slate, because they played the Ray Thrasher Classic and the Mountain Lion Classic in Tennessee. They were in Nashville, and then they were in Colorado Springs before they came back. And then they started off really well in NSIC play, getting wins over MSU Moorhead, UMary, Minot, and then eventually getting that big win against St. Cloud State at the BSU Gymnasium. So, I mean, it's just some nice momentum for this team who's trying to, like you talked about, establish themselves as a middle tier in, a very, very tough NSIC volleyball conference.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be an absolute dream if this team could. Last year, I remember coming down the stretch, we were kind of like, if they can steal another win or two, they might sneak into that last playoff spot. They didn't end up doing that. I think they lost like 6 games in a row towards the end of the season. So they kind of slipped up at the end, but man, I'm not expecting it, but that would be awesome if they could be up there competing coming down towards the end of the season for a playoff spot at the end of the season.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. That's like the high bar. Can you sneak into that NSIC tournament? Be fun to make noise, but if you just get in there, or at least fight for it, get to that final. Last year in the final weekend, they won their last 2 games, but I mean, they were already eliminated from getting into the tournament. So if you can put yourself in a position where the final weekend of the season you're competing for something, hey, that'd be a good season for BSU volleyball, and really just allow them to get into allow themselves to get into a much better position, for them. If you're looking at Bemidji State heading into conference play. And again, this can all be a little skewed because depending on how many sets and stuff teams have played. But Bemidji State right now currently 9th in the conference in kills with 369, technically tied for 8th with Wayne State, Concordia, St. Paul, Sioux Falls, St. Cloud State, Southwest Minnesota State, and Winona State round out the top 5 for kills overall. If you look at percentage, Minnesota Duluth has been able to land most of their kills at a 33% clip, where Sioux Falls is at 29%, Northern State at 28%. Those guys round out the conference. Bemidji State sitting at about a 17.8% attack percentage. So again, it's just, how many of their hits end up becoming a kill is basically what, and give them a point is when you're looking at that there. But overall, I mean, they get into the conference play. It's a good volleyball conference. We'll see what happens when things go down. Ian, we got a couple things we need to barrel through because we have some hockey stuff that we want to get to at the end of the podcast here. But what do we got? What's the next sport we're covering?
Well, we can finally talk about how the golf results went from last week when we were kind of talking about how that was going. Bemidji State did end up taking first on the men's side in the Beaver or the Bemidji State Invitational. First out of 9 teams. I mean, that's a pretty good result. This team
win your home meet. I mean,
yeah, win your home meet. That's awesome. It's fall golf. We're not taking it too seriously yet, but
hey, out here vibe.
It'd be awesome if this team could make another run at a conference championship like they had a couple of seasons ago. That would be really fun to cover this spring.
Super, super fun as well. Over on the women's side, the Beavers finished in 6th place at the Tracy Lane Memorial, which again was in Bemidji last week as well. If you're looking for the for this week, Bemidji State men's golf is in Ferris competing in the Bulldog Classic. And for Bemidji State women's golf, they are currently in Hudson, Wisconsin for the Minnesota State Concordia St. Paul. They call it the Maverick Golden Bear Fall Brawl, which is weird because they both Minnesota schools, they play it in Hudson at the Troy Byrne Golf Course. Bemidji State in day one finished 9th out of 10 for women's golf in that one. Flipping on over to the men's golf side of things to see where they land after the first day of competition. As again, now as I say this, my stat page is just taking forever to load on me. But Bemidji State, the Bulldog Classic, they finished 7th out of 9 on day one. So we'll see what happens, and we'll break it all down again next week. But looking at the cross-country results for Bemidji State University, it's the Dragon Twilight, which was at MSUM. It's like you ever heard of it, Ian, the Roy Griak? It's like an invitational for the University of Minnesota cross-country. It's like a big day of like the high school meet, and then they have a college meet, and it's like supposed to be just one big kind of powwow. This is like North Dakota, or like, you know, the western Minnesota equivalent to that, with MSUM and it being right on the border with North Dakota. It's kind of their equivalent. So a lot of Minnesota and North Dakota, even some South Dakota high schools show up and run, and then they run at night in this race for cross country. And 4 Beavers set personal best. Maggie McCarthy, a junior, led the charge with an 18th place finish with a time of 19 minutes and 26 seconds. It was the only Beaver to land in the top 20 in that race. They grabbed 3rd place in the annual Minnesota State University Moorhead Dragon Twilight, and 4 Beavers to have personal best times for the 5K distance race. So that was pretty cool as well. All right.
Yeah, I mean, 3rd out of 13. That's pretty good.
It's a nice one.
Can't complain about that.
Can't complain when you're there. And it's a hodgepodge of teams. A lot of North Dakota schools will run in that one. But yeah, it's good for them. Good for them to do that. And now they move on to their next meet, and that's the NSIC conference preview in Minot. That's going to be on October 4th. So a little bit of a break for Bemidji State women's cross country. And it's going to be the race will kick off a stretch of 6K races for the remainder of the fall season. So here we go. It's weird that we talk about that because it's just their second meet, but they have the preview on the 4th. Then they run in St. Cloud State on the 9th of October. And then they don't race again until the end of October, where it's the NSIC championship. So sports like that move kind of weirdly paced. Fall sports always has such a weird pace because it's like you start in the summer, so you kind of don't want to start too early before the school year begins. But then you need to get it done because winter sports are coming, and a lot of these are like outdoor-based sports, and you want to wrap them up. Or if it's a gym-based sport like volleyball, you know, basketball's on the way, so gym space is getting limited, and it's fascinating. But let's flip the page here, Ian, and let's talk hockey. Bemidji State men's hockey, the CCHA Media Day or whatever they call them. So they get ready for the start of the season. What do we got? What's the latest headlines for BSU men's hockey?
Well, they released the preseason polls for both the coaches and the media. Bemidji State tied second with Michigan Tech, but they had one more first-place vote than Michigan Tech. St. Thomas leading the way in the coaches poll, followed by Bemidji State, Michigan Tech, and Minnesota State. Bemidji State receiving 3 first-place votes, identical to St. Thomas. And then in the media poll, Bemidji State tied for first with St. Thomas, but receiving 5 of the potential first-place votes. St. Thomas with 4 right behind them. And then Minnesota State, Michigan Tech, Bowling Green, Lake Superior State, Augustana, Northern Michigan, and Ferris State. So that's a little bit of a preview towards what the season will look like for the Beavers. People in the coaches and media rooms expecting more good things from the Beavers this season. And then if you look for...
It's especially true. I know. Sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
It's especially true for the hockey team as a whole. After, you know, the vibes weren't great at the Sanford Center following the season and the transfer portal and losing pole camp and all that to kind of reroute themselves and to still get some pieces back in. It's a good sign that people have faith that this program can still be a good hockey team this winter.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the other teams in the conference also got gutted in the offseason. So I do think Bemidji State does have just as good a chance to repeat as McNaughton Cup champions and hopefully add a Mason Cup in there as well. But we'll get more into that as the season rolls along. A couple of individual preseason award watch list members. Matthias Scholl tabbed as the preseason goaltender of the year in the CCHA. Yeah. And then I believe it was Jackson Panzer who got some buzz as newcomer or freshman of the year in the rookie of the year. I can't remember what they call it, but I
think it's
Jackson
newcomer
Panzer.
of the year. But
let's see. Here it is. Freshman forward Jackson Panzer, Grand Forks, North Dakota, was voted by media members as the preseason CCHA Rookie of the Year.
Then never mind.
So,
don't question me or always question
year.
anything I say.
Yeah. So good for Jackson. I've been very excited ever since he flipped his commitment from UND to come here and play for Bemidji.
You can only stand being in Grand Forks for so long, you know?
Right. He grew up there. He's like, I got to get out of here, man. I can't do any more of this. But he'll have to go back to beat North Dakota a couple times. But
that's true. He'll come back for that. On business.
He'll go back and stand on some business. But other than that, I'm very excited to see what he can do. He's a welcome sight after losing Leighton Road. Couple of incoming transfers as well. Carter Ranclev, very excited to see what he can do offensively to help this team. But yeah, hockey season right around the corner. I believe we're less than a month away now from hockey season. On the men's side, the women's side, I believe it's even closer. I
think they start the season at the end of the month, if I remember right. I think it's
September 27th and 28th.
We are 10 days away. We are 10 days away.
Yes. 10 days, 1 hour and 29 minutes on the dot as I am.
Doesn't it feel like hockey weather outside right now?
Yes, it's like 85 degrees, but hey, maybe it'll cool off a bit by the end of the month.
I mean, let's go. Let's do this thing. I'm hyped. Let's get her going. Let's get it going. One last thing, and then we'll wrap up here. Did you see the Seattle Kraken, Ian, had a story on their webpage talking about Leighton Road and possibly his, again, their wording, not mine, his road to the NHL. And I read the article, and it talks a lot about, obviously, I know that Lucas, when he's been on, has talked about how he went to the development, how Leighton Road went to the skills camp and development camp for the Seattle Kraken, and he got on their radar. There's an old assistant coach from Bemidji State, whose name escapes me, who is on their scouting staff, and then kind of use that connection to get a spot into.
Is it Eddie Olczyk?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it, to get in and to get his foot in the door. And then he came right in after the season ended for Bemidji State, hopped into Coachella Valley, played really well, and basically just earned himself a spot. And it's not only is that great for Road, and hopefully he gets to be the second. I think it's just White Cloud right now, isn't it? For the only active Bemidji State players in the NHL.
I think Brad Hunt gets up for a game every once and then, but he's no longer a mainstay in the NHL. He kind of just comes up depth piece.
We'll take it. We have two. We'll take a third one's coming.
Yeah.
Hopefully he cracks the roster. And as we saw with White Cloud, they get up and they end up making a name for themselves. And White Cloud held the Stanley Cup. Road claiming his spot in the NHL or trying to. And I know the transfer portal makes it tough, and there's a lot of things in college hockey working against smaller D1 schools like Bemidji State. But you got to think that if you're Sarah Torrey and you're that coaching staff and you're talking to a potential recruit and you point at guys like Road and you point at White Cloud and you're like, if you come here, you can still get to the league. You can still do this stuff. And that's huge. As much as when Gunnar Olszewski made the NFL for the Patriots, it's huge for Bolte to be able to look and say, I got that, that guy went to the NFL coming here. You can do the same thing. it's huge when you have guys like that go on and work and do all the things that they need to do to get in. So it's huge. Go read that story on the Seattle Kraken website if you can, because it's just cool to hear kind of what he's been doing and the fact that they've been really impressed. And by the way, new head coach for the Seattle Kraken was his coach at Coachella Valley, if I remember right, or if I read that correctly.
You could be. I to be honest,
one of their minor league coaches essentially got the job and has worked with him already. So he's been on the radar, and I think that's cool. So that's something to watch as the NHL hockey season goes by. We talked about a lot, Ian. Holy cow, 50 minutes on this podcast. A lot going on with Bemidji State. It's not stopping anytime soon, by the way. Yeah. So let's go. This is fun. A lot of stuff going on at Bemidji State. Anything else that you need to say your piece?
No, I don't think so. I think we've got it all covered. Hopefully women's sports can add to their tally and get some conference wins here early in the season. And big football game in Sioux Falls, going to be a tight one. 2 evenly matched teams. Should be another exciting weekend of Bemidji State sports. Join the Discord. Get in there. It's on our social pages. Follow us everywhere. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook. YouTube. Yeah, YouTube.
The Discord.
Give us a follow. Get in the Discord. Hockey season's right around the corner. That is by far, no offense to the other sports, but people in this community just get up for hockey games. They love it. It'll be super hockey, exciting.
Baby.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Let's do it. All right. Ian, any Chargers references you want to sneak in before we end the show?
Oh, CJ. You know what? 2-0 for the first time since 2012. I could not believe it had been that long since they had been 2-0. But I thought about, because the Chargers game against the Panthers looked very similar to the SMSU Bemidji game, where it's like clearly this opponent is overmatched. The team played a little sloppy, but still got a win by 20-plus points. So it was a very similar game in that aspect, but I toned it back and I didn't make the comparison on the 1-1 this week. But, go Chargers. 2-0, baby. And the Vikings. Hey, I was too low on the Vikings this year, man. I know that Brock Purdy kind of turns into a turnip every time he doesn't have 6 All-Pros and he only has 5 on his team. But
I think it's just the only time he plays the Vikings. The only NFC team Purdy's lost to has been Minnesota. So
yeah, that's a crazy stat. But
Brian Flores,
good for the Vikings, man. Flores, he's been nuts with that defense. So
Vikings 2-0 for the first time since 2016. Surely nothing bad happened that year. So I think they won the Super Bowl that year. I think they started like 5-0 and then they won a bunch of games and nothing bad ever happened. And TJ Clemmings was sentenced to Siberia, and Mike Zimmer had 2 working eyes at the end of the season. It was perfect.
Yeah, the season's only 2 games long. There's not 15 more. Protect
your eyeballs, Kevin O'Connell. That's all I have to say. All right. I think both seasons also included like a week 3 match with the Houston Texans where at US Bank Stadium. So, just something to throw out there. All right. That's going to do it. Beaver banter, by the way, last time presidential election year. I mean, there's so many parallels.
Did you see the thing? There's a thing. So Derek Carr and the Saints have been going absolutely nuts this year. Somebody made the correlation. It's only 2-game sample size so far, but Derek Carr in an election year is absolutely nuts. 2016 was that year all the way back then when he was getting like MVP hype in Oakland.
Yeah,
and then 2020, it was his best QBR rating over the course of that season. And now so far he's averaging like 45 points a game with New Orleans. So people are like, what is it about the camaraderie of a presidential election that wakes up something inside Derek
He just
Carr?
feels the tension in the air and he feasts off it, I guess. I don't know. It's like the Baltimore Ravens have a stat where whenever they beat the Minnesota Vikings, the Vikings coach gets fired that season. And it happened, I think, with Denny Green. It happened with Leslie Frazier, and it happened with Mike Zimmer. So, Kevin O'Connell, the next time the Ravens are on the schedule, you best win.
You better get up for that game, man.
You better get up for that game, or your grass, man. All right, I think we're good here. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast.